The Attitude Era, WWE's golden age of rebellion, where legends like The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and The Undertaker carved their names into history. But behind that blinding spotlight were others. Men and women who once stepped into the ring with dreams of glory, only to be swallowed by time and overshadowed by fame. They fought, they hoped, they gave everything, and yet, they faded away as if they were never there. Today, we're turning back the clock to remember those forgotten figures, the ones who helped shape an era but were lost in its chaos. This is the Forgotten WWE Stars of the Attitude Era. Let's dive right in. Wrestling Sphere, go. 1. Mr. Hughes. When talking about some of the strangest characters to ever appear during the Attitude Era, Mr. Hughes is definitely a name that makes many fans chuckle when they remember him. He perfectly represents how an idea that looks good on paper can completely fall apart once it hits the real stage. Curtis Hughes, better known as Mr. Hughes, wasn't a stranger to wrestling fans. Before returning to the WWF in 1999, he had a short but memorable run in the early 90s, portraying a cold, stone-faced bodyguard dressed in a black suit and sunglasses, protecting major stars. That image was once considered cool, and even helped him gain recognition in WCW and USWA. But when WWE decided to bring him back during the Attitude Era, things didn't go quite as planned. At the time, WWF had just welcomed a rising star, Chris Jericho, who was being heavily promoted as the savior of Raw. Apparently, management thought Jericho didn't look intimidating enough on his own, so they paired him with Mr. Hughes to make him seem tougher and more dangerous. On paper, that idea made sense, but in reality, it turned into a disaster. Instead of becoming a convincing duo, Hughes looked unmotivated and completely out of place. He had lost much of the menacing presence that made him stand out in the early 90s. His slimmer build didn't help either, making him appear less imposing than before. Fans couldn't understand why a charismatic and sharp-tongued rising star like Jericho needed a quiet, emotionless bodyguard tagging along. The situation became even more ridiculous when Jericho later revealed in his autobiography that Mr. Hughes once fell asleep right outside the ring while Jericho was performing. No one knew if he was tired or simply bored, but the incident became a running joke backstage. The storyline was scrapped within just a few months, and Hughes vanished from WWF as if he had never been there. Afterward, he continued making brief appearances in the independent circuit, but his contribution to the Attitude Era was practically non-existent. Today, when fans recall Mr. Hughes, they mostly remember him as the sleepy bodyguard, a forgotten footnote in one of the wildest periods in WWE history. 2. Nicole Bass. When people talk about the women of the Attitude Era, they usually think of glamorous, seductive figures who were portrayed as sex symbols of their time. But Nicole Bass was the complete opposite. She didn't rely on beauty or allure to stand out. Instead, she turned heads with her massive physique, bulging muscles, and the commanding presence of a true female powerhouse. Before joining the WWF, Nicole Bass had already made a name for herself in the bodybuilding world and had appeared in ECW, where she showcased a bold, unconventional, and unapologetic persona. Her appearances on The Howard Stern Show also made her a subject of curiosity and controversy, as she came across as both fascinating and polarizing. With that background, many believed that once she entered the WWF, the home of larger-than-life characters, she would become the next breakout star. Unfortunately, that prediction never came true. Despite her impressive physical presence and striking image, Nicole struggled inside the ring. Her matches were often short and more for spectacle than actual competition. Even when paired with Val Venis in an on-screen romantic storyline, the angle leaned more toward comedic and risque entertainment rather than highlighting her strength or individuality. Outside of wrestling, Nicole also faced challenges in delivering promos and connecting emotionally with the audience. A crucial skill during the Attitude Era, when charisma and mic work were often as important as in-ring performance. Without strong speaking ability or clear creative direction, she quickly faded into the background amidst a roster full of loud, dynamic, and colorful personalities. By July 1999, Nicole Bass officially parted ways with the WWF, ending what turned out to be a brief and unfulfilled run. She occasionally appeared in independent shows afterward, but her name soon disappeared from mainstream wrestling conversations. Looking back, Nicole Bass remains one of the most unique figures of the Attitude Era, a woman who dared to be different, standing tall in a world dominated by glamour and sensuality. Yet sadly, in an era defined by intensity and charisma, her light, though distinct, burned out far too soon. 3. Brockus. At first glance, Brockus seemed like the perfect prototype of the kind of superstar Vince McMahon always dreamed of for WWE. Tall, insanely muscular, and built like a warrior forged from steel. His physique alone could leave the crowd in awe. Yet for Hashim Albrecht, Brockus' real name, sheer size and strength weren't enough to survive in the ruthless world of the Attitude Era. When Brockus joined the WWF in March 1998, he stepped into the company at perhaps the worst possible time for a newcomer to stand out. The stage was already dominated by megastars like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Mick Foley, and The Undertaker, not just powerful wrestlers, but larger-than-life personalities who had built deep emotional connections with fans. Brockus, despite his monstrous frame, lacked one crucial element: identity. He had no real character, no storyline, and most importantly, no meaningful opportunity to prove himself. Instead of being presented as a fearsome powerhouse, Brockus was used in a supporting role, appearing in short, forgettable matches, often serving as an enhancement talent for established names like Jeff Jarrett or Goldust. To the audience, he was just another big guy who showed up, flexed a little, and disappeared. He wasn't memorable enough to be loved, nor bad enough to be booed. He was simply there. The defining mistake of his career came during the summer of 1998, when he was thrown into the infamous Brawl for All, a legitimate shoot-fighting tournament where wrestlers actually hit each other for real, with no scripts or choreography. According to multiple accounts from backstage, Brockus didn't even realize it was a legitimate fight until he stepped into the ring and was hit for real by Savio Vega. The result was a quick and painful defeat in the first round, shattering his muscle-bound warrior image in minutes. Following that loss, Brockus was quietly moved to secondary shows, continuing to lose against mid-card talent until the WWF officially released him in July that same year. Despite once being seen as a potential next big monster for WWE, Brockus ultimately became a prime example of one undeniable truth about the Attitude Era: muscles alone didn't make a star. What truly mattered was personality, something Brockus, unfortunately, never got the chance to show. 4. Barbara Bush. In 1999, during the explosive height of the Attitude Era, when WWE was overflowing with bold, sexy, and often controversial characters, a new face emerged with a slightly different flair. Barbara Bush, better known as BB, portrayed by Kathy Dingman. She wasn't a trained wrestler from the start. Instead, she debuted as a ringside EMT, a role that seemed minor at first but unexpectedly gave her a brief window into the glitzy, chaotic world of sports entertainment. BB made her first appearance on a Thanksgiving episode of SmackDown in 1999, performing the Heimlich maneuver to save the cat after the infamous Gravy Bowl match. Though it was just a short comedic segment, fans immediately noticed the striking blonde nurse. Seeing the audience's curiosity, WWF quickly capitalized on her appeal, moving her into an in-ring role and involving her in storylines surrounding the Women's Championship, particularly a feud with Ivory, one of the era's standout female competitors. Before long, BB became a familiar presence in the kind of adult-themed entertainment segments that defined the Attitude Era. From bikini contests and wet t-shirt competitions to over-the-top gimmick matches like the Holiday Topless Top Rope match, her name frequently surfaced in WWE programming. Commentator Jerry, the King Lawler, known for his excitable reactions during such moments, helped cement BB's place in fans' memories with his over-the-top enthusiasm whenever she appeared. However, BB's spotlight faded as quickly as it arrived. After only a few months, rumors began circulating backstage about her alleged relationship with Bob Holly. Whether true or not, the company quietly released her soon afterward. There was no farewell segment, no storyline closure. BB simply disappeared from television, ending her brief WWE run as suddenly as it began. Barbara Bush, with her charming smile and alluring nurse persona, may not have left a lasting legacy inside the ring, but she perfectly represented the vibrant, unpredictable, and often controversial energy of the Attitude Era. She was a reminder of a time when even a single moment, or a single character, could become iconic overnight, or vanish just as quickly, lost amid the dazzling chaos that defined one of wrestling's most unforgettable periods. 5. Beaver Cleavage. If there were ever a list of the worst creative ideas in WWE history, beaver cleavage would easily land near the top. It wasn't just bizarre. It was a perfect example of how the Attitude Era often pushed boundaries so far that even the most ridiculous concepts somehow made it to national television. The story began in 1999, when the Headbangers, The tag team, consisting of Mosh and Thrasher, split up after Thrasher suffered an injury. To keep Mosh on TV, WWF decided to reinvent him with a new gimmick: a grown man who behaved like a child, lived with his mother, and was frequently fed milk by her. Yes, that was the entire premise. The character, Beaver Cleavage, was loosely inspired by the wholesome 1950s sitcom Leave It to Beaver, but twisted into something weirdly suggestive and uncomfortable to watch. From the very first segments, fans were completely confused. The vignettes weren't funny or entertaining, they were awkward, cringeworthy, and left audiences wondering, what on earth am I watching? Instead of generating laughs, the character became an instant embarrassment. The fan reaction was so negative that WWF had no choice but to pull the plug on the gimmick after only a few weeks. In an attempt to fix things, the company had Mosh break character on air, claiming he was tired of being treated like a joke. He then returned under his real ring name, Chaz, accompanied by the same woman who had played his mother, now revealed to be his girlfriend. But instead of improving, things got even worse. The storyline took a dark turn, suggesting that Chaz was physically abusing his girlfriend. A tasteless and poorly executed angle that was met with outrage from fans and critics alike. Even for the anything goes attitude era, it was considered a step too far. Fortunately, the nightmare didn't last long. When Thrasher recovered from his injury, the Headbangers were reunited, and WWF quietly erased everything related to Beaver Cleavage as if it had never happened. Today, Beaver Cleavage remains one of the most infamous creative disasters of the Attitude Era, a cringeworthy reminder of a time when WWE was willing to try absolutely anything, even ideas that never should have seen the light of day. 6. Giant Silva. Throughout WWE's history, the company has always had a special fascination with giants, those massive, larger-than-life athletes who embody raw power and spectacle. To Vince McMahon, they were living mountains, perfect symbols of strength, grandeur, and pure entertainment. From the legendary Andre the Giant to icons like The Undertaker, Kane, and Big Show, fans have grown accustomed to seeing giants dominate the squared circle. But for every towering success, there have also been those who never quite reached their potential, and Giant Silva is one of the most notable examples. Born in Sao Paulo, Brazil, Silva was originally a professional basketball player and even represented the Brazilian national team before transitioning to professional wrestling. Standing over 7 feet 2 inches tall, about 2.20 meters, and possessing a colossal frame, he was the very picture of brute strength. Seeing his marketable appearance, the WWF quickly signed him, hoping to mold him into a visual spectacle, a new, giant phenomenon for the Attitude Era. However, Silva's wrestling career took a very different turn. Despite his intimidating size, it soon became clear that he lacked in-ring fundamentals and the agility needed to engage audiences in compelling matches. Instead of being presented as a dominant monster, Silva was placed in the oddities, a bizarre, eccentric stable featuring Golga, Kurgan, and the rap group Insane Clown Posse. With their strange outfits, carnival energy, and comedic tone, they provided light-hearted entertainment amidst the chaos and aggression that defined the Attitude Era. As the gentle giant of the group, Silva drew attention simply through his size and disarming smile. His most memorable moment likely came at SummerSlam 1998, when the Oddities defeated Kai En Tai in a 3-on-4 handicap match. Beyond that, however, Silva's WWF run offered little of note. After just over a year, Giant Silva quietly left the company, remembered as a misplaced giant, too kind to be intimidating, yet not compelling enough to stand out. He later found more respect in Japan, where his extraordinary physique was appreciated in a different wrestling culture. Still, for WWE fans, Giant Silva remains little more than a faint memory, a towering figure overshadowed by the true legends of the Attitude Era, a mountain that stood tall but never quite cast its own shadow. 7. Salvatore Sincere. In the mid-90s, when WWF, the precursor to WWE, was experimenting with flashy, over-the-top, occupation-based gimmicks to attract viewers, Salvatore Sincere stepped into the spotlight as a dramatic, Italian gentleman type of character. He portrayed a charming yet sly mafia-style figure, all polite words and fake smiles, masking a manipulative edge. Debuting in 1996, Sincere immediately drew attention thanks to his unique persona. Unfortunately, his arrival coincided with a period when professional wrestling was undergoing massive transformation. Unlike short-lived gimmicks such as the Goon or TL Hopper, Sincere managed to stick around as the Attitude Era began to take shape. While never a top-tier superstar, He remained a consistent presence on Raw throughout 1997 and 1998. Each appearance often saw him serve as a testing ground for rising names like Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, or the young rookie Rocky Maivia, who would later become the global icon, The Rock. Though he never captured any championship gold, Sincere still played a role in WWE's evolution, helping bridge the gap between the old cartoonish style and the grittier, story-driven entertainment that was soon to define the industry. However, once the Attitude Era fully exploded, there was no longer a place for theatrical gimmicks like Salvatore Sincere. The audience's taste had shifted. They no longer wanted smiling mafiosos or exaggerated personas. They craved rebellious, raw, and realistic characters like Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock. Sincere's polished, colorful image quickly felt outdated, and he was gradually pushed out of the spotlight as wrestling entered its bold new age. On March 17, 1998, after a match against Jeff Jarrett on Raw, Salvatore Sincere quietly closed his chapter in the WWF. He returned to the independent circuit, competing for a short while before fading from the mainstream wrestling scene. No one could deny his talent or dedication, but timing and creative direction simply weren't on his side. In another era, Salvatore Sincere might have become a true icon. Instead, he remains a faint yet fascinating memory from the early days that led to the legendary Attitude Era. 8. Scott Putski. On paper, Scott Putski had everything it took to become a major star in the WWF. He was the son of the legendary Ivan Putski, an icon of the WWF era, famous for his raw power and intense, crowd-pleasing style. Born in Austin, Texas, Scott was expected to carry on his father's legacy and make the Putski name shine once again on wrestling's biggest stage. Yet, what seemed like a sure path to success never materialized. Scott Putski debuted in the WWF in 1997, right as the Attitude Era was beginning to take shape. Instead of being presented as a powerhouse in the mold of his father, he was inexplicably slotted into the light heavyweight division, a decision that derailed his career before it could even begin. The problem was obvious. Scott weighed around 260 pounds, which made the idea of him being a light heavyweight completely unrealistic. How could fans possibly buy into a man of that size competing in a division meant for smaller, high-flying wrestlers? Still, WWF tried to make it work. They paired him with Brian Christopher, one of the division's key figures, hoping to build interest around the mismatch. Their matches were technically fine, but the crowd simply didn't connect. The audience couldn't relate to the concept of a giant light heavyweight, and the experiment quickly lost steam. Meanwhile, megastars like Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock were redefining the company, soaking up all the spotlight and fan attention. Rather than rethinking Scott's direction, WWF doubled down on the failed idea throughout the summer of 1997. When it became clear that nothing was clicking, Putski quietly left the company that September, ending his short and disappointing WWF run. He had a brief stint in WCW afterward, but once again, he struggled to leave any real impact. Had he been given the right creative direction, Scott Putski might have become a worthy successor to his father's legacy. Unfortunately, poor booking and a complete misunderstanding of his strengths turned him into one of the forgotten names of the Attitude Era, a star who never had the chance to shine before fading into obscurity during one of wrestling's most explosive periods. 9. Just Joe. If there were ever a title for the most forgotten character in WWE history, Just Joe would undoubtedly be one of the first names to come up. Not because he was terrible in the ring, but because his character was, quite simply, forgettable. During an era when every wrestler had a bold personality, a distinct storyline, and a memorable gimmick, Just Joe was just there. His very name summed it up perfectly: Just Joe. Nothing more, nothing less. Before arriving in the WWF, Joe Hitchin, his real name, was a seasoned veteran of the Canadian independent wrestling scene. He came up alongside future legends like Edge and Christian, competing with them in small promotions around Toronto. However, unlike his peers, Joe wasn't discovered early. It wasn't until the year 2000, right in the peak of the Attitude Era, that he finally received a call from the WWF. On paper, it seemed like the big break that could change everything. Unfortunately, the gimmick he was given turned out to be a dead end. Just Joe was introduced as a nosy backstage meddler, a guy who thrived on spreading rumors and stirring up locker room drama. His segments usually involved him whispering to one wrestler that another had been talking behind their back, then slipping away before chaos unfolded. It created a few mildly amusing moments, but never led to anything meaningful. At a time when larger-than-life personalities like The Rock, Stone Cold, Kurt Angle, and Chris Jericho dominated television, a rumor-spreading side character like Just Joe simply couldn't compete. Throughout the summer of 2000, Joe was mostly relegated to lower-card matches, facing opponents like Joey Abs or the Brooklyn Brawler. With no storyline, no character development, and no real spotlight, his role quickly faded into obscurity. By March 2001, the WWF released him, quietly ending a run that most fans barely noticed had begun. Just Joe serves as a perfect example of how not everyone could thrive during the Attitude Era. In a time overflowing with charisma and creativity, he was simply another guy. Not impressive enough to be loved, yet not bad enough to be hated. And perhaps that's the cruelest fate for any wrestler, to not be remembered at all, even after standing on one of wrestling's most iconic stages. 10. Aguila. Among the many faces who briefly appeared during the Attitude Era, Aguila, the high-flying luchador from Guadalajara, Mexico, is one of the most underrated and overlooked. He possessed everything fans today would celebrate: lightning speed, crisp technique, and breathtaking aerial agility. Yet, in the late 1990s, that wasn't the style WWF prioritized or promoted. Aguila made his debut in November 1997, just as WWF introduced the light heavyweight division, an attempt to showcase fast-paced, high-skill matches similar to the cruiserweight action thriving in Japan and Mexico. Unfortunately, American audiences at the time weren't ready for it. Their attention was locked on heavyweight icons like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and The Undertaker. In that environment, smaller, technical performers like Aguila never stood a real chance to shine. He had all the tools to become a star: an athletic frame, explosive speed, dazzling acrobatics, and a natural connection with the crowd. But WWF simply didn't know how to utilize him. Instead of pushing him as a legitimate contender, they reduced him to a sideshow act, someone who would fly around the ring for a few minutes before giving way to the company's bigger attractions. Throughout his time in WWF, Aguila went through several identity changes, from Aguila to Papi Chulo and later S.A. Rios, yet his career never truly took off. Even when he briefly captured the light heavyweight championship in 2000, the victory was overshadowed by the larger-than-life storylines dominating the era. Ironically, the main reason most fans still remember S.A. Rios today isn't because of his own achievements, but because of who accompanied him. In 2000, he was escorted to the ring by Lita, who soon broke away from him to join the Hardy Boys and form Team Extreme, going on to become one of the most beloved and influential women in WWE history. As for Aguila, the spotlight never fully returned. After parting ways with WWF in 2001, he went back to Mexico and continued wrestling on the independent circuit. But in WWE fans' memories, he remains a shooting star, brilliant for a moment, then gone too soon. Had Aguila arrived 20 years later, he might have stood shoulder to shoulder with the likes of Rey Mysterio, Ricochet, or Kalisto, wrestlers who transformed the luchador style into a true art form on the world stage. And that's it. The stars who once shined brightly before fading away in WWE's legendary Attitude Era. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the exciting wrestling stories coming your way from Wrestling Sphere.